If we have to learn 3,000 words in a language, what is the best way to do that?
If I were to answer your question more fully and direct.
People want to know, so Vaughn, how many languages do you speak? I pause because it's not where I normally head to in the conversation. Tell us about your experience with brain scans.
The brain scan result.
Well, I am excited to be here with Vaughn Smith. Vaughn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I believe you have some Mexican backgrounds or Mexican history, or at least some Spanish history. Is that right? Maybe you could start off by telling us a little bit about what that looks like.
Oh, so yeah, completely bilingual for as long as I can remember. I don't remember a time when I did not speak Spanish because I think I was just automatically raised with both, and I lived in Mexico as a very small child. And so it is like the family connection. So there's like, of course, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my uncles, my aunts that I've known my entire life, the ones that are my age or older. And so it's very pivotal to me. It really just made me stand out as a kid when I was growing up and going to school in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is just outside of DC, because I was like the only kid that knew this secret language that was called Spanish. And no one else. I didn't meet any other bilingual kids. Everyone just knew English. My father himself learned some Spanish, so he was aware of, he could communicate with my mom. And yeah, it's just a really important sort of like a pillar of my life, pretty much growing up.
I guess having another language as you grow up, it plays an important function in making you understand that English is not the whole world, right? It gives you a different perspective. And I grew up monolingual. I didn't, I did French and German at secondary school, but I didn't learn another language properly until I was, not about 19. And even then, learning a language at that age, it was striking just how it breaks your world open, and you realize that English is not the main. It's just not. There's more to the world than English. What do you think that meant for you? And it's a generic question for any bilingual person, I suppose. But given that we're going to get onto the fact that you now speak a lot of languages, how important was Spanish to what would transpire in the rest of your life and your desire to learn lots of languages?
Wow. I think that knowing Spanish made it easy to pick up French, some of the French that my mother knew. And it's difficult for me to think about this because I've never been a person that's monolingual. I cannot tell the difference between how I would see everything if I were only to speak just English and nothing else. So I might just be taking this for granted, like my facility for learning languages. Maybe it's something that would have happened anyway. I don't know. Maybe it would have come easy to me. I'm not sure about that. I do believe that knowing Spanish, knowing two languages already made it easy for me to observe the concept that there are other sets of vocabulary that can be memorized and put to use. But when I started to learn German, of course, German being a Germanic language as English is, it was not, how to explain this? It's like, I learned some German vocabulary to pick it up, but I did not have any formal, there was nobody in my family to actually teach me to speak proper German, no people to look up to. But I think that it's me being curious about it, already knowing one language that people around me don't share. And then in middle school, it was the time that we came up to studying about World War II in the history class. And in the literature class, we would read the Diary of Anne Frank. And I think that's kind of like there was already something there to, pique the interest in any language. Putting to use the German phrases that would come up in the stories. It was always me that was like, okay, Vaughn, can you read this to the class? How do you pronounce this and that? And I think that was kind of like that. That was like that third step into, okay, I already speak Spanish. I speak English. This is easy because I can pronounce, it's easy for me to pronounce these words. And I already had this tongue that was able to make sounds in English, make sounds in Spanish. Maybe that helped a little bit. I'm not 100% certain of that. Because I cannot compare myself to the me that would be if I only spoke English.
Yeah, you don't know the counterfactual, right? It's a little bit like for me, I can't compare myself to to what it would be like if I grew up bilingual. But it's interesting because I watch my daughter who grows up bilingual, and she is. I mean, English is still stronger for her. Cantonese is her second language. I watch her effortlessly speaking two languages as a 10-year-old. But then, as soon as sometimes she says to me, Daddy, can you teach me a little bit of Spanish? And I do, and I notice how difficult it is for her to get to wrap her head around the different language. Even though she does have a facility to hear sounds and to make sounds. She has that facility that a child who's grown up monolingual wouldn't have. But it's striking to me that even if you do grow up bilingual and you do speak two languages, when you come to your first foreign language, it is a different animal, isn't it? Because you can't learn it in the same way that you learned your mother tongue. There's a metacognitive discipline needed in order to start the language, to tackle it, to take it on, and to say, right, this is difficult, but I'm going to pursue it anyway.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting concept to think of. It certainly was a different thing when I started to learn German. I'm sorry, not German, but I'm talking about Russian. When I started entering junior high school and high school, and that was completely different. I had to learn a different alphabet, but still, it's like, okay, well, let's get this done. I'm a novice in this, but I think it just seemed pretty easy to me. But then I also did have to get used to the concept of inflections and the fact that nouns can be declined and the endings have to change, and sort of the adjectives that qualify the nouns. And this is like a new concept because it doesn't happen in English or Spanish. But it was kind of an exciting new challenge, and but pretty embraced it. It took a lot of study, but I can certainly see where you're coming from with the story about your daughter. It's like this new idea to sort of like wrap your head around. It was like that for me when I got into the Slavic languages, for sure.
Walk us through your teenage years, because you started learning French at 11, I believe, and then by the age of 17, you already knew a whole bunch of languages. So what was, just briefly, just tell us the story of your languages in those years.
So I think everything sort of kicked off when I went into junior high school in DC proper. I went to Alice Deal, and there were some exchange students there. And I think that also there were a lot of I was in this sort of area of DC where it was like a really big sort of mix of immigrants and kids of foreign workers, and certainly kids that lived on the embassy residences. For example, the embassy of Hungary. Gabor Bohotinsky was my first Hungarian friend that I ever met, and so he knows this really bizarre language. To me, in my idea, it was bizarre at the time. This language called Hungarian. And he would teach me some phrases, this and that. That was also very different. But it was kind of like, okay, here I am in this environment. There are people all around me that know all these different languages. I started to learn a lot of Portuguese. A lot of Brazilians lived in the area. And especially when I went into high school, which is just across the old battlefield, so to speak. From the junior high, there's Wilson High School on the other side of Fort Reno. And that's where I had a lot of Brazilian friends, a lot of Africans from what was then Zaire, Congo, Cameroon, that would speak this African variety of French. And here I am during my lunch break in the high school. I'm hanging out with all these, with all these kids that are just kind of like looking for some sort of like a social network, because they're not native they're not native Washingtonians, and we're in this large high school that's overwhelmingly American by majority, and but there's a small group of people that are like from other places, and they're sort of like hanging out together and exchanging ideas. And in the middle of this is me, just like, oh yeah, here's our American friend Vaughn. Let's have lunch together and talk about things. And I'm trying to tell them about the city, and they're telling me about their places of origin, and also teach me phrases at the same time. And there's the people from Sri Lanka, and there was some from what was in Yugoslavia, some Romanians. A brother and sister from Armenia that were also in the embassy. They were from Cluj. And here I am every day, just kind of like I have this like library of references where I can ask how to say this and that. It was pretty fun and but like having a good time at the same time and just hanging out.
Yeah. What is, and so you hear you're what, 14, 15, 16?
So at that time, it was about like by the time I was done with high school, I was familiar with 17 languages about. Yeah.
Okay. I was referring to ages, but I guess it was like 15, 16, 17 languages, and you are about
I didn't
15,
hear you
16.
properly. I'm still there's some background noise here. Forgive me, all. So yeah, you're talking about when I was 15 or 16 at this time, 14, 15, 16.
14,
Through
okay.
my junior high and high school years, yeah.
And you knew as many languages, or you were familiar with as many languages already by that point.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. What is motivating you at that age? I get the sense that, I always believe that, relatively few language learners that I meet are motivated purely by the academic side or purely by the study of the language. There's always more, there's always something else to it. And I get the sense listening to you that you had a connection to the people and you were interested in the people. Were you learning the language for the language's sake, or were you learning it because you wanted to know these people, to get to know them, to understand them better, or was it a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two, and I would say that definitely for German, I was learning it for language's sake because I didn't know any German. So when I was learning German, it was interesting because I think all the students in the school were all hyped up about World War II. They're learning about the Third Reich, the Nazi regime, and what's going on around Anne Frank's life. So we're all sort of like at that time in what I was attending. St. Michael's in Silver Spring. It's a private Catholic school. It's just one class of all these people that we're all following the story at the same time. And that's when I'm like, okay, well, I'm learning it for language's sake, but also because it has to do with the now. It's got to do with what we're learning in school. I want to, sort of like have that edge of being the person that knows what these words mean and stand out and, do the readings. So definitely that's the case for German. For Russian, also more or less, I started to I borrowed a Russian language book. It's like Berlitz Russian. I borrowed it from the library, and I was like reading through it, but I really didn't know the pronunciation because all I'm doing is looking at a book. Soon after I'm starting to learn Russian, that's when I meet two diplomat kids at my high school. Then it sort of like took off. So yeah, definitely for language's sake, but I think that Russian would be the last example of that. And the rest of it's like, okay, well, there's people in Sri Lanka. I've never heard of this Sri Lankan language, but now that they're there, let's learn some so I have some sort of like connection to them. And definitely it's got to be some connection with the people. And it's a really good connection because these are people that come from somewhere else that have very interesting stories to tell and very interesting facets of life to share with me.
Yeah, I think in my case, I sort of discovered language learning for language learning's sake, as it were, much later, because my early languages were all learned because I met a group of people who I really wanted to ingratiate myself to, and essentially just wanted to make friends with them, and that was the catalyst, that was the inspiration. And it was only as a result of that I started actually getting interested in language learning techniques and things like that. So we'll come on to that in a second. Let's fast forward to today. Now, I'm going to ask you how many languages you speak. And as a fellow language learner, I can only imagine how much you hate this question, but people want to know. So, Vaughn, how many languages do you speak?
26.
26. And
yes.
Can you define speak for us? How do you think about speak is such a broad catch-all term, and obviously none of us speak all languages to the same level. So how are you defining speak when you talk about the languages you know?
I go by two criteria. Number one, if the person I'm speaking to looks at a third person who is not speaking the language that I and this person have in common and says, he speaks it. Second criteria is that's my own criteria. It's like, okay, well, it's anyone. It's easy for someone to say he speaks it if I just say a couple phrases, but I don't believe that I speak it. And my criteria is that I know the prepositions, I know all the basics of grammar. I know how to count to 100 at least. And I can at least touch upon different subjects, different aspects of life. And just have like a general conversation where I can say an entire paragraph and understand an entire paragraph. That is more difficult to define in specifics, but I think the easiest way would be like all the inflections, how to maybe like 50 or so of the most common verbs, how to use all of the pronouns, how to a knowledge of all the prepositions and how they function. As I said, like the numbers, and yeah, I think that's like a good sort of like summary of criteria what to know, so that I can say, yeah, oh, okay, I can speak that.
I think that's
maybe not to fluency. You won't be to fluency, but
sure.
But I can speak it.
I think that's very fair, and I think that's very fair, and it's actually interesting to me that you define that in quite technical terms, in terms of the number of prepositions and things like that. I mean, I've always had something that I learned from one of my tutors many, like decades ago now, who told me that they were trying to define the upper intermediate level, or B2 level, and they said, if you can go to the pub with someone, have a beer, and enjoy a conversation without the other one getting bored, then you can say that you speak that language legitimately. And it doesn't matter how many verbs you know, it doesn't matter how many mistakes you make, because if the purpose is actually successful communication and that person wanting to be there, having that conversation with you, then you've succeeded. And so I've kind of coined that the pub test, and I always use that now. And I think it's somewhere in between an intermediate and an upper intermediate. And obviously it helps a lot if you have some stuff in common, because, you know, I've had like legitimate friends, genuine friends before in languages where I don't actually speak all that much, but because we have something in common, there's a shared interest, we can actually carry on quite a long conversation doing that. But I've always thought of defining it in terms of the quality of the conversation, and the quality, meaning, and depth of the conversation, irrespective of the linguistic elements.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to define it. I like that. I like that analogy, just like that like little pub conversation, and how deep it is. Yes, very good.
Has your approach to learning languages changed a lot since those years to now, or do you do fundamentally the same thing?
It's a really complicated dynamic. It's changed in the sense that, you know, after my high school years and after having worked in DC with Czechoslovak and Russian, and just, you know, speaking live, now, you know, the internet comes into play, and the facility of using apps on the phone like Duolingo. You know, I use Duolingo to start to learn Welsh. And fundamentally, what stayed the same was just me making lists of words and sentences that I'm trying to focus on memorizing, and put them in a book and just carrying with me, and practicing it, reading over the list at different times of the day, which is something I do. I'll like get on the bus. Okay, well, I'm not driving, so let me look at this. Or I'm waiting for somebody, or I'm getting coffee somewhere. Let me look at the list. Let me do some reading. What has fundamentally stayed the same is books. I always have books on me. If I may, just like my backpack right now, I have one of your books.
Oh, nice.
So it's using this. It's really helping me with to learn Dutch. Like, I can already understand like more than half of it, but it's like, oh, here's a good mix of vocabulary that I really could use. And I look for literature such as that. I'll probably find something at used bookstores, $2 or $3. I'll get something like a little Turkish story. It's a Turkish translation of a play by Shakespeare. Things like this. All books are very fundamental. And if I don't have the books on me, and it's just me on my phone. So that would be the new thing. It's like there's the smartphone. There's the world of the smartphone, where not only I don't have to stick to just Duolingo, but I can use other applications such as Pimsleur, or just look at the news. I like looking at the news in different languages, where it's like Ilta-Sanomat, for example, the one in Finnish. It's like, okay, there's little stories and they have captions. That's the glory about closed captions with these European languages. They have it all written, so I can look at how it's written as well while the story is being said. And these have been very, very useful for me to pick up full sentences that I can memorize. The way that the words connect, the jargon and euphemisms that are in the language. So it really has developed into like, now I've got this. I not only have my traditional way, I not only have my books, but now I've got, the internet to help me when I don't have any other resources on my hand.
Yeah. And just to reflect back what you said, people listening will have heard quite a few different things there. They would have heard lists of words that you memorize. They would have heard books. They would have heard Duolingo, Pimsleur, the news, translations of Shakespeare plays. What's the common thread with all of these things? Because there's you will find people who will say that memorizing lists of words is a terrible idea. And you'll find people who say that, reading a Shakespeare play is probably so hard that it's, you don't stand a chance of taking in anything. And Duolingo, well, that's obviously just a waste of time, isn't it? So you obviously use a big mix of these things. So what's the common thread, or what are the first principles that you're using when you're managing all these different resources? What are you trying to get at?
I think the common thread with all these different things is the exposure to new words.
So it's vocabulary.
Vocabulary, yes. I don't know how to really expand on it because there's so like what you can hear things. It's like you also need the audio exposure. You need to be able to know how these words are pronounced. And you get that on the internet when you look at the news. Iltas hanamat, where they say it out, but there's no audio when you look at books.
Sure.
Then again, in Duolingo, if you have a voice, it's the sort of like robotic voice that tells you how to pronounce the phrases that are there. There's not. It's such a broad mix that I can't really put them all together and say, oh, this is the one thing that's in common.
But we can say that. So from what you sorry to interrupt. I just want to drill down on this because I think we can agree that it's all about the words, right? In those early stages, if you don't know the words, nothing else really matters. There's no point studying the grammar if you don't have the words to start using it. But then people will immediately turn their attention to, well, what is the technique to learn lots of words? And because people who are not natural language learners, people who don't have many languages under their belt, do experience a lot of friction in this, in the memorizing, the retention of words. And so inevitably we look for techniques. And we ask questions like, what is the best? So if we have to learn 3,000 words in a language, what is the best way to do that? Is it to memorize the lists? Is it to use Duolingo? Is it to read the books? And you seem to be saying that it's kind of any and all of the above in whatever combination of things you can get your hands on. Is that fair?
No, if I were to answer your question more wholly and direct, it's like really the best way is immersion. You want to learn Swedish? Go to Sweden. Go live in Sweden. If you want to learn Zapoteco, go and stay in a community somewhere in the state of Oaxaca where they speak Zapoteco and just get in with the locals. Really, immersion is the best way. As far as my techniques, I do some immersion when I'm traveling to Europe. It's not something I can do every day because my life is pretty much based in DC, and I don't necessarily work with people now that are speaking Norwegian or Swedish around me all the time. So it's like it's different for me. I have to have something to sort of like make up for that, and then I have like this big slew of different methods that I just carry around with me, so to speak. But immersion really would be the best way if someone's looking for that.
Are you trying to create an immersion environment? For example, you're carrying a book of Dutch short stories right now, but you're in Mexico. Is part of your approach here to try to create that immersion environment through the use of lots of different materials?
Somewhat. There really is no true substitute for true immersion. So I think that the advantage that I have is because I read something and I'm very good at memorizing it. Whereas someone who might not be necessarily good at memorizing what he or she reads, for that person, it might not serve as that much of an advantage. So immersion really just helps everyone. So whether you're a poor learner or a good learner, good memory or bad, there's no substitute for immersion.
Now, you said the word, you're very good at memorizing it. What does that mean?
So like, yesterday I was at a restaurant and I asked the waiter, how to say, this, this is really, está muy sabroso, which means this is really good. I had pozole, and the people that work there they're Mayan speakers. I asked him how to say, ¿cómo se dice en Maya? Esto está muy sabroso. And he tells me, Hach manki lahanlo. So I memorized it.
If you're reading a book of Dutch shorts, that's what the example there is one very functional phrase. But if you're reading a book of short stories, what's your approach to memorizing within that kind of context? Presumably you're not trying to memorize the whole book. So are you actively filtering? Are you trying to memorize things within a story?
I'm looking for a vocabulary that's foreign to me, looking for new vocabulary and just putting it in the sentence. And sometimes just reading it, I can surmise what the word means by context. And of course, particularly in the example of your book, which I just showed you, it's the ones that are highlighted. It's like about 15 words or so that are in bold type. And some of those are new to me, so I'll look at the reference a couple pages down just to look at the list, because those bold-faced words, of course, they have the translation in English, so that's also very helpful. So I am looking to memorize new words, and also how to the two different things: memorizing new words and looking for the ways that they're put together in a sentence.
The picture you're painting for me is one. I mean, this is not surprising to me at all, but it's one of an someone who's just entirely engaged in the process. You're just using all these different things. You're in control of of what you're doing. You clearly know what works for you. You're comfortable with ambiguity, and it just feels like a very, very rich environment that you're creating for yourself across the board. It's tricky because people always wanted to distill things down to methods, but methods only. This would be an interesting question to ask you, actually. I mean, I always take the view that a method is only really works for getting you started, because sooner or later you end up, there is no alternative but full immersion of one kind or another. So a method of any sort can only really get you from A to B. Do you differ with that? Do you agree with that?
Yes, to an extent. Yeah. That's all. As much as I studied Finnish, as much as I spent time with Finnish speakers in DC, the real challenge comes when I'm in Finland, because now I'm surrounded by it. I'm not filtered by what people, how people limit themselves when they're some place that is not home to them. But everything is happening in Finnish. I'm going to a store, and I'm getting, getting something to go. That doesn't happen when I'm in DC, because my friends are not, they're not servers at a restaurant. So they'll never ask me max specs, which means you want to take it with you. It's like a slang. But here I am at Hesburger in Finland, and they're telling me max specs. It's like, okay, I don't know what that is. It's like, are you taking it by hand? Are you taking it away? And that as one small example of things that are only going to happen in an immersion sort of environment. You're in the country, you're living it, and that's going to supersede whatever list, whatever vocabulary any one book can cover. Definitely what you're saying is certainly true. But even before that step, the vocabulary is pretty useful. Stories are very useful, because a language has a lot of vocabulary. There are a lot of words to know, and just got to keep at it.
Now, you mentioned your Finnish friends in Washington, D.C. Now, those are not two things that obviously go together. In as practical ways you can answer this. If you are in DC or even somewhere else and you decide you want to learn a new language and you want to make friends with people who speak that language, what do you do? How do you find them?
So you're asking if there's this language I want to learn. I think that, I'm trying to think what's a good way to approach this. I was at a language exchange meeting in Washington, D.C., where they have it's like the language exchange DCE language. A group of about anywhere between 50 and 100 people meet up at Meridian Hill Park on 16th Street in Northwest D.C., or they'll go to Dacha Beer Garden. And you'll find new people at every meeting. Some of them exchange students, some of them are here just on a work permit or something. I think there was a woman who spoke some Shona that I met, and So she taught me some words. I'd never heard of this, but here she is. Okay, well, teach me some phrases. And she's like really delighted to tell me, yes, this is how we say this. We talk about that. All of a sudden, she's talking about her home, and she's excited that someone's listening to her for one. But it's like I met the person first. I don't think that I would have taken really an interest in Shona if I had not met that person. So coming up with like a randomly new language, that would only happen if I were to if I had planned, for example, a trip to Mongolia or a trip to Laos, or something happened where it's like, oh, I have to go Laos, so I'm going to meet these people that are from this place. We're going to hang out for a few days. Then it's like, okay, well, maybe I can look up some words or something, maybe try them on on the guests and see how they respond, see if I'm saying them correctly. There's got to be some sort of like reason at this point to start. Usually that is like meeting someone that's from somewhere that seems like a person who's open to some sort of like to like speaking, to exchanging ideas and stuff. And okay, well, that person knows a language. I might have heard of it, I might not have. But let's go into maybe some words or something, count to 10, or some greetings and simple questions.
So you're starting with the person. Always, it's the person first, and then it moves to the language. Yeah, it's interesting because
the past few examples would be that. It started with the person.
Yeah, it's just the reason I ask is because there's so many people who are learning some Spanish, but they don't have any local Spanish friends, and it does seem to be difficult for a lot of people to take that step of actually going and finding people and becoming close enough to them to have enough confidence to be able to practice the language without switching to English. The same old story. Do you have any advice for people in that situation?
Yeah. So basically, most of people, look up, just go into it. You only live once. Like it's like it really doesn't. It's the worst that can happen is like you don't learn anything, but at least you tried. But definitely, if someone takes some interest in that, just like dive into it, or look at your sources. You can look online. Everyone has a smartphone. Start somewhere, and I think at this point it's really like just a social barrier. If that person is confident to speak or not, that's up to that person. But I would say, yeah, absolutely, just go for it.
The energy, isn't it? The energy. You got to grab the bull by the horns. You got to do it. It is possible to waste so many opportunities and so many years actually of time if you don't take those small opportunities that pass you by. And sometimes it's just a question of feeling the fear. To quote the book, you feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Brain scans. I paused. I paused because it's not where I normally head to in the conversation. But with you, it is interesting because you have some experience with this. Tell us about your experience with brain scans, if you can, and what you have learned from it or drawn from it.
The brain scans. The latest one would be the one that I submitted to on the 10th of February, 2022, when the Washington Post paid for me to go to MIT in Boston, and I was put in a brain scan. And then, I guess, what do you call the apparatus? MRI machine? I think what was it? Maybe it was something, a technical term was different. But yeah, so here I am in this tunnel, sort of like laying down in a horizontal position. Hearing this noise and machine spin around me, while at the same time I have a mask on that has a mirror. It's got like a prism in it, and I can look at images of words on the screen, and also there's audio. So I'm listening to things, and they're testing my brain while all these stimuli are being exposed to me. It was about like a 2-hour brain scan with a break in the middle. Luckily, I didn't get claustrophobic. I was fine. But I stayed there for the entire time, and they said I did really well. The brain scan results and the graphs and the images that came out of this that they had put together were much more simplistic than something that I was expecting. It's like, okay, well, this is showing this fuzzy area of the brain that's reacting to the stimuli. When you're using language, this is the whatever hippocampus it was. I forget the technical term for it, but the part of the brain that reacts, it's like it's half as reactive as that of a person who is not a polyglot. So it's like the summary was that I'm using the language part of my brain more efficiently with less effort. if that makes any sense. And I think that's just kind of like what the result of that. I did not get like a big scales and values and exact, um, calories spent or joules of energy, etc. No, it was much more simple.
What were you doing during those 2 hours whilst you were in there? Were you exposed to different languages, or how did it work?
So they would show me a list of words in English that kind of like flashed, and then there was a list of words in other languages that sort of like flashed in and out, and then there was an audio part where it's like I would listen to some languages I would be familiar with, some that were not on the list. So like they exposed me to someone, speaking, reading religious scripture in Thai. That how I know it was a religious scripture, I'm just guessing, but I think it's a guess. But yeah, so they're looking at images on a screen while these audio files are being amplified so I can hear them. Really nothing more than that. There was one where they would ask logical questions. So it's kind of like a control factor. They would ask questions about logic in English. It's like an example of them would be like, a building was renovated in 1973 to add 5 stories on top of a 3-story building. And it would ask, a photograph of the building in 1971 shows it having 8 stories. Well, it's a logic question. The answer is no. So I'm using 2 fingers to either press the answer for yes or for no. While this is happening, to look at that. And I think that was the last part of the test. That was pretty much it. That's the limit of that.
Interesting. And so the upshot was that the brain of a polyglot is more efficient. It needs less oxygen to actually function. Is that, do you know if that's been trained, if you've evolved that way through many years of language learning, or do they believe that that's a natural kind of inbuilt efficiency that your brain has?
Their input on it was that it's the same for all polyglots. They tested other polyglots and also people that are not polyglots, and the same result. So I think it's something that comes natural to me. I cannot be more specific on that because that's the only time that I study my brain for such a purpose. I don't really have much to add.
So it's not possible to say whether you're born that way or whether it's developed through practice. We don't know that.
It's not possible for me to come up with that conclusion with the tests they made, but it's something I believe I was probably just something that came naturally to me.
Yeah, I suppose it speaks to that. This whole the whole belief of some people are born with the language gene, and I never really buy that personally. I think that we're all capable of lots of things if we put our mind to it. But I suppose the danger with these kind of studies is that they can become self-fulfilling prophecies, can't they? If it was proven that you were born with a more efficient, that part of your brain being more efficient, then it could mean that other people then are not able to learn lots of languages because they weren't born with that particular. I instinctively don't really. I don't know. I have a distinctive aversion to that kind of thinking because. I've seen lots of different types of people of all types learn lots of languages, and I never even want to suggest that it can't be done or that people shouldn't try.
No, I don't want to suggest anything either, but I do think that there's at least, if nothing else, there's the interest, and that's different from person to person. Some people they just have an interest for language, whereas others don't. Whether or not it's easy for that person to learn, that's like a separate issue, I think. But just to really, to want to learn something, to have that desire, that's unique in some people.
That's a great way of putting it. Okay, we have lots of questions from viewers from the video that we made about you on our YouTube channel. And so I thought we would do this in a kind of rapid fire type approach. So short answers if you can. We'll see how many of these we can get through without being too repetitive. So do you focus on specific dialects, or do you try to learn more generic versions of languages?
Both. More generic versions, but if I know the people that are with this dialect, I'll go with the dialect.
Right. People first, right? You're learning the language you need to communicate with those people. Makes perfect sense. What is your take on which languages are hardest to learn?
Some of the hardest to learn, I think, are some of the North American indigenous languages, particularly Navajo, Salish, as well as, I think, Definitely Finnish and Lithuanian were very challenging, but I'm very familiar with them now. So as far as grammar goes, yeah, Finnish, Lithuanian, Hungarian, all of the Finno-Ugric branch, some of the Baltic languages. I think Lithuanian is much more difficult than Latvian, for example. But by far the hardest would be Salish for the pronunciation and for the grammar, Navajo.
I have a question here, which is how do you choose which languages to learn when there are so many options? I think we've answered that largely, but maybe I could finesse that question slightly and ask it. How many languages would you typically be learning at the same time, and for how long until you move on to the next one? How do you figure out your cadence?
Oh, really? There is no rhyme or reason to that at all. I started to learn Mandarin on a road trip in 2009, and it's not that I stopped learning it. It's just that I put it on pause. I'm going to get back to it. I purchased books for furthering my Mandarin, and they're sitting on my shelf. But it's at one point or another, I'll look at them. So, and to answer like how many at a time, maybe 5, 6, 7 at a time. The books I brought with me, for example, I have books in 7 different languages that I'm, and here in Tulum, I'm going to ask people to teach me some Mayan as well.
Maintenance. You have mentioned many languages. How do you maintain them? How do you think about maintenance of languages that you've learned?
It's important to maintain languages. I maintain them as much as I can whenever I have any opportunity. So I sort of like do like a scheduled maintenance. For example, if I'm going to go travel to Mexico in 1 month, and I'm going to meet with Nahuatl speakers, it's like, okay, well, it's time for me. Let's read some more. Let's make sure that I have what I memorized. Just kind of like review it. Okay, I still know this and that. It's like scheduled targeted maintenance. Beyond that, just regularly spending time picking a random language off the shelf and think to myself, okay, I haven't touched this language in a while. Let's review. Maintenance mostly audio. So mostly like literature and also some audio because, like I said, I'm looking at the internet and look at news.
How do you approach learning endangered languages like Salish, where there are far fewer resources than you might be able to find for a mainstream language?
Salish was very unique, and it was a very interesting story. To try to summarize it, my niece and I were looking at audio files. Once after having read the Lewis and Clark journals, getting to the chapter where they meet with the what we now call the Salish Indians. They didn't have a word for it in the journals, but this internet search looking at discovering that they have in Kusum, which is a school for immersion for sailors, so they're still maintaining it to this day, and they're engaged in a very serious and dedicated language preservation. They had audio files that were on the internet that you could just access from anywhere. Sailorworld.com, I think it was. And so we looked at a picture of a chicken. I pressed it, and then the audio file came out: chicken squeeze. And my niece, being in the room at the time, she thought it was a very funny word. Chicken was her favorite food, so all of a sudden she knows this word squeeze was chicken. She's like, we're learning at the same time, and like for dinner we're gonna have squeeze, and she's excited. It's like, okay, yeah. And now like my entire family is sort of like excited. She's learning this new language. I sent an email to the director of the inclusive school saying, hey, we're learning Salish. Could we come and visit you and maybe look at that and talk about language preservation, because I do the same thing with the Nahuatl language in Mexico. Me coming with that approach and that background, I did receive an email response saying, if we do a visit to your family. So long story short, trying to make this brief, we travel in the summer of 2010, and we meet with the directors of Kusum and the people there. They received us pretty well. They gave us literature. They talked about their school and their efforts to sort of keep the language going in their camps and everything it is that they do. We visit them again 5 years later. We were invited to their powwow. It was when we came back that they realized, oh, okay, this is something they want to continue. These people are pretty serious and they want to know us. And sort of like this friendship came from that. Speaking specifically to the Salish language, that's a very unique and a one-of-a-kind story. As far as other endangered languages, I'm here in Tulum. I don't know really how endangered Mayan is, so I don't know if that's a very good example, but I'll go with maybe Zapoteco, which is in Oaxaca. Zapoteco is very rapidly losing speakers because the younger generations are not learning the Zapoteco. So, when I'm there, I had made friends with someone who's in the village of Nitla, Don David Pabloquero, who is a fluent Zapoteco speaker. I visit him and introduce my friends whenever I'm passing his house on the way to the Nitla ruins. And to sit down, talk to him. I'm sort of like keeping an eye. Just I think that it's really key to know someone, to have some sort of like a friendship with someone who's like involved in the community and that believes in the continuation of an endangered language, and seeing how important that is. Just exchanging ideas on things that they can do to get the younger people to be interested in it. So it's putting something back, because I have that background with the Nahuatl language, seeing how important that is for like teaching the younger generations, where the government all of a sudden fails to produce the books in the language. It's like we need to come up with some idea to sort of like encourage people to encourage others to keep it going.
Thank you. How do you switch between languages? Do you have any sort of system or method, or is it just a question of it is what it is?
I think it is what it is. Like, we'll switch to Spanish. Cambiamos a español así rápidamente sin esforzar. Let's switch to Spanish. It's like, I don't know. I don't even think about it really.
Is it not harder with languages you know less well? I mean, I imagine, certainly for me, I'd find if I was learning 7 languages at the same time, I would find a lot of interference from one to the next.
I think that used to happen. That used to happen when I was like in my high school years, I'm learning a bunch of languages at the same time. Maybe that's sort of I would mix in some words that are from other languages that might be in the same family. But no, I think that maintaining that discipline is a separate skill altogether. And I think that I sort of like mastered that. But yeah, I don't get confused anymore. Now it's like if I'm reading something and I'm trying to study Estonian, it's like it's just me in Estonian. It's me in Estonian. I'm not thinking about anything else. It's just Estonian. But yeah, it's like maintaining focus. That's like the key ingredient to that. Focus.
That's definitely a word that's come through this whole conversation for me. Vaughn, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating hearing about your background, about your languages, and the way that you think about this, and very inspirational for me as well. So thanks again, and tell people. Well, I normally ask people at this point where they can find you online. Can people find you online? Is there a place that you would like to direct any interested parties to find out more about you?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel, The Multiglot, TheMultiglot. It's me on YouTube.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put a link to that in show notes and web pages, wherever else this ends up. But thank you very much once again, and I hope we get to meet up one day somewhere in the world.